Hello YouTube, welcome back to our next week of VCT Pacific. We're already getting close to playoffs, which means we're getting close to the end, which means we're getting close to Champion Soul, so things are moving pretty fast. But we just had 2 weeks of VCT Pacific, and we are now, in fact, on patch 8.11. So the ISO and Neon changes are in, Haven is back in, and Abyss not yet. We're going to have to wait until playoffs for that one. So we've seen a lot of changes. We've seen some interesting things happen in VCT Pacific, especially in week 2, and let's review how that changes our thoughts on some of the teams and also maybe some changes in our Pickems coming up for week 3. So let's dive right into it. Oh, I wasn't ready because this was not week 1. This is week 2. Let's change that. And this will be our next going into week 3. So, in week 2, going into it, after we saw our first look of some of the new rosters, but not on the new patch, if you're wondering what the reason is here, there's probably some things that are upsetting people, especially after the results we had of week 2. For instance, I think Secret, probably a lot of you are going to think that they were rated too low. I explained my thoughts in the previous video, so you can go check that out. I don't want to rehash it every week, but that is where we were. So again, let's go with the standard stuff, which quite frankly this is kind of weird to do because Genji did not play in week 2, but therefore, like, I guess there's no real reason for me to take them away from week from the top. So I mean, I think PaperX has looked stronger. I think they are consistent in their ability to. Sorry, my image is like shifting a lot, isn't it? Anyway, I think PaperX has been consistent in showing more discipline than before. I mean, the Haven was a little wonky against DRX, but they were also playing a bit of a crazy comp, and I would have imagined that's normally their permaban if Breeze isn't there. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe they wanted to test it out, but overall, there's no actual proof for me to put them above Genji just yet because we haven't seen Genji play on the new patch. Now, DRX. Listen, I think I think the cracks are showing for DRX. The question is who do I think would be above them if that is the case? And there's some candidates. I think Secret is a candidate. I would say all 3 of these are candidates, but I would say maybe more so Talon and Team Secret. The thing about DRX is that obviously, again, very, very strong individuals, mechanically pretty talented, but even mechanically, they're not able to just like trump their opponents, right? The PRX game, sure, it's PaperX, fine. We'll write that one off. But then against RQ, granted, the RQ players, some of them, their peaks are very high. If you're not able to trump them consistently enough that you can now confidently just play for trades, well, then now, like, what do you have? And I don't think that, I'm not saying it's doom and gloom for DRX. I just think this is where they should be, is that they need to be going through this to change and evolve and figure out their new balance and style, right? Because it's a bunch of new players. I was talking about this earlier on the stream, but you got several new players playing at this level. You've got role changes coming for a couple of these players. You've got a new IGL that hasn't had to like hold down the entire team, let alone actually make the calls. And then some of these players also, while, you've probably had interactions with Termi in passing, you haven't had to work with them week to week, right? Even if you've been on the academy squad for DRX, you haven't worked with Termi and Glow as coaches and Argency, working week to week to really download their data and then showcase it with these teammates. So as great as I would say all of them are individually, and as amazing as Mako and Buzz have been throughout their careers so far, even internationally, it's a team game. So I think this is going to impact even Mako and Buzz's performance to a certain extent. We're seeing a lot of hesitancy, and I think what Termi talked about in their press conference is pretty accurate, right? They were starting to play scared. They were like giving too much respect and not even playing to their own strengths of their compositions. I was also starting to get a little concerned about Flashback's Asian pool because they were really trying to force the Clove. They have changed that when they played against RRQ. It didn't lead to a win, but for instance, I thought putting the Omen in instead of the Clove on split was a pretty good idea. So looks like they're working through things, but I think it's going to take some time. But then who is up there? Man, so first of all, I said this in my Pickems for Team Secret versus T1. I predicted T1, but this would be the game where Team Secret can convince me. right? Because I think T1 is going to force Team Secret to play as a team more so than just individuals. So we'll see how that happens. They still had great individual performances, and then they actually performed decently as a team. I would say T1 played worse than they did against Gen G, but still. So all credit to them. I mean, I want to give Team Secret the credit they deserve now. But on top of that, I would say Talon, I thought, played... I think Talon showed their strengths against RQ. I actually don't think Talon probably played as well as they should or could against RQ, and I think they leaned into their strengths, right? Their willingness to get a little crazy, their willingness to really lean into that, their understanding of team compositions and strengths, things like that. So, I mean, just off of the performances, Secret goes above Talon, but Talon's given me more hope, and I don't know if, like, Secret's definitely not 7th anymore in my head, but I don't know if I rank them higher. I'm a little torn. I don't want to change my formatting, right? I want to make sure that there's a line. And let's get back to this. Let's assume that these are 3, 4, 5, 6, somewhere around there. Dude, man, dropping T1 all the way down to 7th is rough too. It's just all these teams are so close. That's why. But I do think T1 goes back to 7th. I mean, they started to play so passive against Secret. Do I think they could be stronger than DRX? Well, I think they could. I think this is a world where if they played tomorrow, T1 could beat DRX, but I think DRX is still a stronger team, like with a little bit of outlook. Not like giving them, a full year, but like within the season, I think DRX could get stronger. Let's put T1 here. Let's see how that works out. The rest of these teams, it just might be time. Dude, what happened to Zeta Division, man? And I say this as someone who just never really had any faith in Zeta either. Well, what happened to the squad, man? I mean, I'm torn between Zeta and Bleed, but oof. Yeah, see, on paper, I think Zeta should be beating Bleed, but Zeta just looks so lost. I mean, Bleed didn't look the greatest against G, but I would say GE finally played like the way it would seem that they finally played a little bit like how they prep. So I'm going to give Bleed a little bit of I don't think Bleed's like strong enough to rank into the mid tier. I just don't think they have the depth, right? But I would say what they're good at, they're okay with it. I mean, okay, yeah, we're going to stick with that for now. I think Zeta probably has a higher high still than Bleed, but we haven't even seen those highs come up recently. I mean, Huron seems to be waking up a little bit, but he's still so shaky. Like, you can just tell this dude is panicking on stage. I mean, I feel like they really need to get him a mental coach because he is panicking on stage. Okay, let's get back to the mid tier. DRX. Listen, so I think Talon is above RQ. RQ looked great against DRX. They looked great against DRX, but so here's my thoughts on DRX or RQ and Talon. I think obviously we still have to wait and see because the sample size is just one weekend, or I guess plus the past, but it feels like RQ will continue to do well against teams that play pretty, like, honestly, if that makes sense. But I think they're going to still struggle against teams that don't, right? So, for instance, DRX was starting to respect a lot of the util, etc. And I think also RQ, I think their prep is very strong. So I think teams with very strict colors, I think RQ is going to do well against. but are they really going to be able to identify that mid-match? I'm not convinced yet. Because I think that's one of the things that Talon had over them, is that Talon was basically throwing them off, and RQ was like, oh, okay. Like, and then also, like, Xfer and Omimore had a bit of a low day against Talon. Man, but Secret in third also just sounds crazy despite the upgrades. I mean, these are all very similar, but I think it's, since we've kept it, and I think there is meaning to identifying, like, a top 3 power versus none, so... Or versus the rest versus none. The question is where does DRX go in between all these teams? Or even Secret, right? I would say, like, maybe Secret and Talon, I kind of tie them together, but for different reasons. Maybe I've actually put Secret slightly higher than Talon. I'm not quite sure. But, like, where does DRX go? Like, my initial tendency is this, but, like, this feels kind of weird. And then my next tendency is, like, this. I guess either way, DRX has to go 6th if I'm... just as a result of me wanting to give credit to these 3 teams more than anything. I would say that the gap, though, compared to Stage 1, when we were doing this in Stage 1, I would say that the gap between, like, here and here is a lot smaller, right? So I would say now, obviously, Gen.G, Paper Rex have kind of solidified themselves at the top 2. But I would say now the mid-range is, like, much like this, right? And then I would say whichever team ends up taking that 7th spot in each, like, week or in each moment, kind of maybe they trade places. Maybe this box extends all the way here, right? I think the gap's getting smaller, which is a very good thing for Pacific. I think that's very good news. Because here's the thing. I also just think DRX is going to take longer to grow. I think all 3 of these teams are currently on an upwards trajectory, whereas I think DRX is in a... They dropped a bit, and now they're in a plateau. So I think this is I actually think, the best moment for Secret, Talon, and RQ to overtake them. I just can't. Talon, the thing is Talon, I think, should have been playing so much better against RQ, actually, with what they pulled off. I mean, I think I'm giving a bit too much credit to Talon, given their performance. You know what? No, this feels weird. The Wild Ori and 2GE are such good additions, though. No, I'm going to do it. I mean, ideally, I would want to put all these vertical together, but that's a cop-out. Nope, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. I'm going to do it. This is what we're sticking with. Oh boy, Team Secret. What a turnaround. How many did they climb up? 4. Holy. Friggin' changing up the entire world here. GE has moved up. Okay, so let's talk about GE a little bit. Actually, I'll talk about this in the Pickems as well. But I feel that GE finally showed what they work towards, what they're prepping, how they prep, what they might look like in scrims. Now, it was against Bleed. You don't want to read too much into it, because Bleed is I think they look better than before, but they're a pretty one-dimensional team. So, you know, I'm not going to say that GE suddenly should be, like, contesting against the likes of Secret, Talon, and RQ, but I do think, but here's the thing, I've been very excited. I've been pretty high on GE coming into Stage 2, and because I feel like I'm seeing glimpses of why I was excited for them, I'm willing to bring them up. I think DFM also, showcasing that they're understanding how to just play around May a bit more, and then, like, Anthem's getting a bit more consistent. Medusa's getting a bit more consistent. He still overextends a little bit every now and then, but it's not too bad. It's not as bad as it used to be before, where he would be like the hero one turn and then the absolute villain and traitor the next turn. So I think DFM has found some consistency. And quite frankly, the Zeta downfall, I don't actually know if I really think their power level is at the lowest of Pacific, but my disappointment of them is literally at the lowest of Pacific. So I think that's what this. I think this is what it shows. Yeah, these are actually, there's some big changes here. And it just goes to show that if we think a team is rising, someone else has to drop, right? Again, I think DRX, objectively speaking, I think DRX, their power level, if I thought they were a grade 3 team, they probably dropped to like a 4 or 5 max. But because other teams, I think, are looking greater and greater, you are correct. Bleed has only dropped 1. DRX has gotten pushed down a bit further. Okay. You know what? This reflects both what I've seen from the teams, what I'm excited about, and also what I'm disappointed about. So I'm okay with that. I think Secret probably still needs to be tested a bit more, but also you cannot deny what we're seeing is that Wild Oreo is cracked. 2G is getting comfier and comfier where he can make confidence plays. He has that clutch factor, which means that Jeremy and Envy have less pressure on them to always be doing that. I think Jeremy continues to perform well. I've always sung Jeremy's praises, so I'm happy he's doing well. And I think Jesse Vash is still keeping up. I think his calls have been pretty good. Stylistically, I don't think Secret has changed too much, but I think literally just having 2 more guys that are willing to go for these confidence plays has already expanded their playbook a bit more. It's made it a bit pacier. So they've definitely gotten stronger, right? Are they really in the 3rd place? I don't know. Technically, I think, again, these divisions are probably now like here and then like here. But, you know, we stick with it. We stick with the format we had. So Secret's up there. Talon, I think just their idea of creativity. I think Cruz's calling is continues to be very consistent. And I think I want to see a bit more from Governor, to be honest, but I think maybe that will come with time. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about Talon, what they can continue to show. And then RQ, I think, looked better. It's just that the other 2 teams looked better, even better, and then Talon literally beat RQ as well. I think DRX, the cracks are showing, and the fact that they just need time to sort out their new color is going to happen. T1 kind of in the same boat. The thing about T1, let's talk about it in the Pickems. Same with G. Let's talk about those 2 teams in the Pickems. DFM, I think if you saw it, May literally just hard carried against Zeta, and they're now playing around May. And Bleed is just a result of other teams getting better, and Zeta is immeasurable disappointment. Okay, so week 3. Originally, we had DFM, RQ, T1, Gen G, PaperX, and DRX. We're changing these. We're changing quite a few of these. First of all, I mean, listen, I was all for the DFM hype train, but I think DFM might actually give Talon a little bit of trouble on like one map, just because of literally May. But I think Talon should be winning this. RQ versus Zeta. Dude, if RQ loses here, we're literally that graph of we are so back and we are so done. So if RQ loses to Zeta, it's like we're literally plummeting down to it's so over. There's just no way this should be happening. T1 versus GE. Chat, this is my upset of the week. This is my upset of the week. And this is where we're going to talk about these 2 teams. I'm actually glad that they're playing against each other. T1, what we saw from T1 when they were playing against Secret was the over-reliance on their strengths, on their known strengths, right? So it's like the setup from Stacks, it's Saya's opping, etc. But this meant that they started to become very readable, and they were also they didn't have enough rounds where they were showing aggressive curveballs. Now, they might do that in the future, but it's inconsistent. To me, GE is maybe somewhat similar to my read on RQ. GE is a team where if the opponents are going to play pretty standard, or at least within a predictable range of, okay, this is their style, we anti them, etc., then I think GE is going to be able to make calls that overcome T1. I think their calls are going to be a bit more flexible. Not the individuals, but the calls. I would say individually, T1 should be trumping GE, but I think they can come up with calls. And the fact that I think they played the way they wanted to against Bleed. Whether Bleed is a strong or weak opponent doesn't matter. You finally got one of those games again where you're like, all right, this is how we prep. Like, this is what we do. I think that should have been a little bit unlocked. So I'm banking on that. I think it's an upset. I think it's an upset for sure, but I think it's a plausible one against T1 here. So I think, and I just don't know if T1's going to be able to sort that out within a week, right? So, and as much as I loved Izu at kickoff, and I want to see that guy do well, he's definitely still not consistent enough to be the power duelist that you kind of need right now to be contesting at a high level at VCT. So that's another rough one. I am glad they're leaning more into him as a primary duelist and giving him a bit more comfort in that sense. Granted, not when it's Jet, because they're still going back to Saya. So that's another thing they need to sort out. But yeah, I'm banking on T1's consistent inconsistency to be the weapon that GE can use against them. Bleed versus Genji. Need I say more? I'm very curious what Genji's going to bring out, though. And this is going to be an interesting look because it's against Bleed, but it's like, you know, you still want to make sure you have the points just in case. So it's going to be interesting because it's their first look of Genji after the patch. Now, Paper X DFM. Listen, DFM, I'm glad they're feeling stronger again, but I think they got their one other win for the year. I think Paper X is going to win here. Oh, I think Talon's going to win this. This is a big week for Talon. This is a huge week for Talon, actually. I mean, I think Talon should win this, actually. I think they should be winning this. There's two worlds where they don't win this. It's either they failed miserably or DRX just like they figured it out in a week, which I don't think their problems are that small. I think Talon might actually really solidify themselves. And here's the thing. If they beat DRX, this is huge because there's a good chance they can overcome DRX, can't they? In the point standing or in the record standing on the leaderboard. They would also then become qualified for playoffs because they're not 100% in yet. So this is a big week for Talon. The only thing I'm scared about is they might want to not show that much against DFM to make sure they can show it, or they might have done, you know, Coach Frost's favorite thing of like, well, we cooked up two comps and they like use one for DFM so they can use another for DRX, and then like that maybe makes it too dicey against DFM. You know, things like that. So that's the only thing because it's a double whammy on DRX is their second match. But I think Talon should be winning both of these matches this week, and that is that's huge. That's huge. So this is a big one. So we're making a lot of changes this week. But in that sense, I think GE versus T1 is my upset of the week. I think it's a plausible one. I don't think I would really... Even the Talon DRX one, I don't think I would call it an upset. I think depending on who you ask, maybe it's a 50-50. But I'm going to favor Talon on this one. Also, I think them recognizing that they actually didn't play that well against RQ, like they should have been playing better against RQ, I think is a good sign that they should be growing into this. So, okay. All right. This week's going to be fun too. I mean, Pacific just delivers every week. Bangers every week, chat. Bangers every week. Bangers every week. Okay, that's it. That's going to be my Pickems for this week. And then we have week 4 coming up. We're not going to change those until next week, but that's when we finally get some good looks at Gen G. Man, week 4 is, chat, you have to clear out your schedule for week 4 because like Paper X RQ as RQ's last game, Gen G versus Secret as both of their last games. I mean, this is huge. Like these are some big matches that could have some big implications. So you want to clear your schedule out for the week after as well. But obviously right now we're focused on week 3. That's coming up this weekend. I will be on broadcast all 3 days, both on the desk and the cast. So I'm looking forward to that. I've been loving the patch and what that's bringing out. And of course, we should have the ISO changes coming in either this week or next week. I can't remember, but see if that maybe... we haven't had too many ISOs to begin with, so maybe that changes up the ISOs a little bit as well. Anyway, lots of things to look forward to. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about my changes in the power rankings. Obviously, quite a bit of volatility. A lot of teams, I think, are getting closer and closer, so it's getting harder to divide amongst them. So I think you're going to have plenty to talk about in the comments, especially from 3rd through 7th. I would love to hear your thoughts. And of course, feel free to share your pick'ems as well down in the comments, and we'll see who continues to do well overall throughout stage 2. That's going to be it for this week. I will see you all in the main broadcast for VCT Pacific. And if you enjoy this content, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. I'll see you all next week.